We found out that Jacob had Asperger's after second grade.
Yeah.
I was just a little kid. I didn't know anything about the neurodiversities that are out there.
And there were some behaviors that were not typical in a classroom, and the teachers were concerned that they were noticing he was having meltdowns.
Yeah, didn't want to do work. He'd go off in the corner or lay on the floor and not want to get up and do stuff he was supposed to do.
He'd start having, he would cry and they couldn't get him to stop, so they would call me. And sometimes your dad would have to go get him.
And we decided to get him tested. And that's when they diagnosed him with Asperger's.
What led to us realizing, because there isn't like a blood test or anything you can do for Asperger's. It's more of a checklist. It's almost like any brain issue that you have. There's no blood test for it.
But usually, like, it's not as easy to understand as the other kinds of autism, is because of the fact that it is high functioning, but for the fact that high functioning also means that you can basically be perceived as normal.
Kids with Asperger's, or now they call it high functioning autism. They don't even call it Asperger's anymore. They are delayed in things like riding a bicycle, sometimes playing sports,
Riding, tying the shoelaces.
Yeah, he was delayed in all of that.
But you get all the positives out of it, that where you can be very intelligent on topics that you enjoy.
They are very vocal and verbal, and so at age 2.5 to 3, he was repeating "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" in full context without any kind of...
And acting it out.
I mean, it was amazing how young he was, but how he was doing that. And when we first learned about Jacob and how stressful it was, we were connected with a lot of parents who were finding out that their kids had Asperger's, and we would talk them through it. And we've worked with a number of families throughout time, but a lot of times they weren't at the point where they were ready to really learn a lot about it.
In denial somewhat still.
Yeah, because it's hard to hear that your child is different from everybody else in a way that impacts their entire life.
To be around him, you wouldn't think anything's really wrong with him because he's fairly normal in most aspects. He's still a little socially awkward.
Take, for example, I walk up to a group of people in a conversation that I wanted to talk to, but I wouldn't exactly know how to do that because, honestly, I am a very social person. And once I actually know people, I am very talkative. But that's also where the difficulty comes in, where it would be initiating those conversations to actually start talking to those people. That's where the difficulty comes in.
If I were to tell people what I wanted them to know about Asperger's, is that kids with Asperger's are smart enough to know they're different. And so when they're treated differently, it makes them very self-conscious. It hurts. They don't know how to always interact with other kids. And so therefore they're isolated a lot of times. And so they're very, very smart. But they a lot of times don't have the friends that the average kid has, because they don't really know how to initiate a conversation or how to initiate an activity, or even ask someone to the prom or on a date. And that's probably still the biggest issue for him in college.
But I've always been constantly working on it.
With him, he works a lot slower than most other kids because he has to process things, and so I would ask teachers to be a little more giving of time, and be a little more patient with him, because he'll get the job done and he'll do a good job. It just takes him a lot longer. So, but it's not because he doesn't know how to do it. It just doesn't click with him like it does everybody else.
And so, knowing that, I started blaming things on it eventually. Once I got to harder times in school, I started blaming things on that.
Asperger's means that a kid with Asperger's is different.
It took a long time for me to understand that it's a part of me. It's a part of who I am, and not just like some kind of disease.
That doesn't make them bad, that doesn't make them stupid, that doesn't make them weird. It just makes them different.
We are going to do all we can to get you through this. We're going to treat you that you're accommodated for, okay? This just means you're a little bit unique. It doesn't mean that you're bad, okay? We're going to get through this.
Well, what I tell teachers who have students with high functioning autism or Asperger's in a classroom is, one, don't give up, be patient. One, don't assume that they are refusing to do because they're lazy or trying to be difficult. Typically, most kids don't want to be bad. They don't want to be unsuccessful.
I have not told everybody that I know that I have Asperger's, because when everybody hears like, oh, it's a mental disability, that they should treat them differently. I want people to know that just because we have this, just take the time to understand how somebody works.
And working with a kid with autism, you have to keep trying until you find things that work, because they're very systematic, they're very routine based. And so a lot of times if you can find something that works well for them, it a lot of times will work for other kids in the classroom who are less organized or who struggle.
What the teachers did do for me to help me get through school was that they would work with me. All it just took was somebody reaching out for me if I didn't feel like I was comfortable with it. Seeing that I was somebody worth taking time for.
So doing little things can make a huge difference, not just for that child with autism, but with kids who are struggling with similar things. Because when we were talking with the psychologist that helped diagnose him, she said we all have traits that could be autistic-like. You know, going through a certain routine to get dressed in the morning. That's a ritual that we all kind of just do.
The main thing is you just got to be patient and try different things.
I think the other thing is, don't underestimate them.
Yes.
Because we were told when Jacob was first diagnosed with autism that he probably would not graduate from high school with a regular diploma. But he is so smart that we refuse to let that be the case. And so he finished in the top 15% of his class. Got offered scholarships for college. When back then, they weren't even thinking he would graduate at all. So don't underestimate or assume what they can or can't do.
You don't have to treat people like me, like anybody else that actually happens to have Asperger's syndrome, any differently. Literally all it takes is just to understand them like anybody else, because that's who we are.